absolutely passionate about this. And one of the things that was my flagship roles during the pandemic and just towards the end was the Jet Zero strategy and the Jet Zero Council that we did at the DFT together. And I was the aviation minister during that period, and it was intended deliberately to do what I referred to earlier, which is bringing the sector together with government, but it's intended to get the benefits of aviation through the use of technology. So I fundamentally don't accept that it is practical, morally right or possible to stop people travelling. I don't think it's the right thing for the country. I don't think it's the right thing for the world. It's certainly not the right thing economically. That doesn't mean that you simply say, I don't care about any of the environmental impacts. And when you look at the things that the sector's doing already, when you look at the environmental steps that have already been taken, they are doing what is needed. What it's our job to do as advocates for the sector, and what's job for government to do, is to help them to go further and faster. So if you look at some of the things that, for example, are, from an OEM perspective, you look at some of the later generations of aircraft. You look at the new technology on engines, you look at composite materials, you look at new wing design. You're seeing with some models a drop of 30% in terms of fuel use from the latest generation to an earlier generation. And one of the things I say to try and make this come alive to people is, the jets that were flying around when you and I were kids, they look pretty similar to the aircraft that are flying around today. It's a tube with wings. But they're not really the same remotely in terms of the way they're manufactured, in terms of the engines that are attached to them, in terms of the technology that powers them. So that's one thing. But where air really comes into it is when you start looking at the infrastructure as well. When you start looking at ground handling ops, when you start looking at surface access, that wider piece around the aviation world, it's not just about emissions coming out of the engines on the aircraft per se, but on the wider operations bit as well. That's where air's got a really exciting. So there's a number of different points that are here. I mean, there is no doubt about it. Aviation clearly is a major emitter, and it clearly has to, there's more work to be done in order to make it cleaner and greener. And absolutely, that's got to happen. But firstly, let's not lose sight of there are other parts of the economy that are also very heavy emitters. And the downside of aviation is that you can see it. You can see aircraft as they pass overhead. So it's always the poster child. It's always in the front of someone's mind when we're talking about this. So let's not lose sight of the rest of that. But the key point is this, which is that in order to make things cleaner and greener, you have to have economic growth. You have to have profit, you have to have finances, you have to have economics that mean you can invest. And provided you can invest, then you're able then to put the money into the technology that you need in order to get the desirable result that we all want, which is aviation that is cleaner and greener. Now, some might say this is all just fantasy stuff, it's all just ideas of things you'd like to do. I just don't accept that at all. So the way we designed the Jet Zero strategy was really on three limbs. The first of those was system improvements. And that means things like, I've mentioned some of the OEMs work they've been doing already, the things that engine technology, that composite materials, that wing technology, all of the stuff that's done now to cut down emissions hugely per aircraft from where they were when we were kids. There's a mixture of how you fly. There's a lot of work going in now onto the effects of contrails, so that's not even emission-based CO2 effects. Operational makes a big deal. Then you've got, you just put your finger on a really good important point there, because then you get things like PBN, points-based navigation, which enables more efficient use of airspace. So for things like, for example, at the moment, we've got an old 1950s airspace system. You get, where we're sitting in London right now, you get some stacking around London as you're trying to get into the major hub airports. You can cut that out with airspace reform. So there's a lot there to be done in terms of operational times, but there's also just the aircraft themselves, which are just the ability to make them even cleaner and greener, more efficient through the use of composite fibres, engine technology, and so forth. One thing I haven't mentioned is the wider bit around, for example, the ground handling operation. Lots of airports around the country, regional airports, are really taking a lot of the strain on this. One of the reasons why aviation generally is so important. It's where the innovation's taking place in the business jet sector, in the small regional sector, for example, as well, on things like electric ground handling. That shows you already how aviation starts cutting things. So that's the first thing, system improvements, technology on the way you operate, on aircraft and on the ground handling system. The second stage you've got then is SAF, which is sustainable aviation fuel. Huge strides going on this, incredible technology going on all over the world to make sustainable aviation fuel out of things like rubbish materials, and so forth. The answer, the flip side to that is that it's twice the price of conventional fuel at the moment.
There's always a challenge.
There's always a challenge. Yes, that's true, but it's there, and once the demand ramps up, then we can look to see that cost come down. And then the third scale is things like hydrogen aviation. Incredible technology going on all over the world. A lot of it right here in the UK. We are genuine global leaders on hydrogen aviation, for example, which in the course of 20 or 30 years' time has the opportunity to hugely reduce emissions, if not reduce them altogether. If you don't invest in aviation growth and economic growth now, you risk losing all of that. You risk the economic growth for the country, and you risk throwing the baby out with the bathwater by destroying the ability to have the clean, green aviation that we all want to see.